Karen's beady eyes narrowed as she stared out her window, glaring at the twinkling lights adorning her neighbor's home. "How dare they?" she hissed, balling her fists. Over the past 3 Christmases, Karen had waged a covert war against her neighbor's elaborate holiday decorations. Each year, she'd waited until the cover of night to sabotage their displays, snipping extension cords, deflating inflatables, even swiping decorations outright. But this year, the Petersons had gone too far. Their home was a veritable winter wonderland, with thousands of lights, animatronic reindeer, and a giant inflatable Santa that loomed over the neighborhood. Karen gritted her teeth. "I'll show them," she muttered, storming toward her garage. Across the street, Jenna Peterson hummed softly as she strung the last of the icicle lights along her roofline. "They're perfect," she exclaimed, stepping back to admire her handiwork. Jenna loved this time of year, when their home was transformed into a magical Christmas oasis. She couldn't wait to see the looks on the neighborhood kids' faces when they came to marvel at the display. As she headed inside, movement in the corner of her eye caught her attention. Squinting, she watched as Karen emerged from her garage, dragging a large black trash bag. Jenna frowned, a knot of unease forming in the pit of her stomach. The next morning, Jenna woke with a start. Something felt off. Rubbing the sleep from her eyes, she gasped as she looked out the window. "Oh no," she cried, her heart sinking. Their entire display lay in ruins, deflated reindeer, toppled lawn ornaments, and strands of darkened lights. Jenna raced outside, surveying the catastrophic scene. "I don't understand," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "Who would do this?" Across the street, Karen peered through her curtains, a malicious grin spreading across her face. "That'll teach them," she muttered, feeling a surge of twisted satisfaction. But Jenna was undeterred. Wiping her eyes, she strode purposefully back into her home, emerging moments later with a determined expression. "We're not going to let this ruin our Christmas," she declared. "We're going to fix this and make it better than ever." With renewed vigor, Jenna and her husband, Michael, set to work repairing the damage. They meticulously untangled the fallen lights, inflated the reindeer, and set the lawn ornaments back in their rightful places. As the sun began to set, their home once again twinkled with holiday cheer. Jenna stood back, surveying their handiwork with satisfaction. "They're good as new," she said, smiling. "Now let's add a few extra touches to really make it special." Over the next several days, the Petersons poured their hearts into their display, adding new elements and fine-tuning every detail. When they were finally finished, their home was a veritable winter wonderland, a true beacon of holiday spirit in the neighborhood. Across the street, Karen fumed, watching the display grow in size and splendor. "This isn't over," she growled, her eyes narrowing with determination. That night, under the cover of darkness, Karen crept out of her house, a pair of bolt cutters in hand. Carefully, she snipped the cords powering the inflatable Santa, the reindeer, and the twinkling icicle lights. With a malicious grin, she watched as the display went dark. The next morning, Jenna and Michael rushed outside, hearts sinking as they surveyed the damage. "Not again," Jenna cried, tears streaming down her face. Who could be so heartless? Michael put a comforting arm around his wife. "Don't worry, honey," he said. "We'll fix this. We're not going to let someone ruin our Christmas." Fueled by their determination, the Petersons once again set to work repairing the damage. But as they toiled, a realization began to dawn on them. They needed to find out who was behind these attacks. "That's it," Jenna exclaimed. "We're going to set a trap. We're going to catch this Grinch red-handed." With a renewed sense of purpose, Jenna and Michael began to devise their plan. They knew they needed to act quickly before the saboteur struck again. "Okay, here's what we're going to do," Jenna said, her eyes gleaming with determination. "We'll install a hidden camera to catch the culprit in the act. Then, we'll present the evidence to the police and put a stop to this once and for all." Michael nodded enthusiastically. "I'll head to the hardware store and get everything we need," he said, already grabbing his car keys. As Michael raced off, Jenna surveyed the partially repaired display, a steely resolve settling over her features. "You won't get away with this, whoever you are," she whispered. That night, the Petersons worked tirelessly to set up their trap. They carefully concealed the motion-activated camera amidst the twinkling lights, ensuring it had a clear view of the entire display. "They're all set," Michael said, stepping back to admire their work. "Now we just have to wait and see what happens." Jenna nodded, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "This is going to work," she said, her voice brimming with confidence. "We're going to catch that Grinch and put an end to this nightmare." Across the street, Karen paced back and forth, her mind racing. She had to find a way to disable the display again, but this time, she needed to be more careful. The Petersons were clearly on high alert. Suddenly, an idea struck her. "Aha!" she exclaimed, a sinister grin spreading across her face. "I know just what to do." The next night, as the Petersons settled in to watch their security footage, they held their breath in anticipation. Moments later, the screen flickered to life, and they watched in horror as Karen emerged from the shadows, wielding a pair of bolt cutters. "That's her," Jenna cried, her face flushing with anger. "I knew it." Michael quickly grabbed his phone, dialing the police. "Hello, officers. We've got the person who's been sabotaging our Christmas display, and we have it all on video." As the authorities rushed to the scene, Karen froze, her eyes widening in panic. She had been caught red-handed, and there was no way out. The sound of sirens wailed in the distance as Karen stood frozen, her grip on the bolt cutters trembling. She frantically looked around, searching for a way to escape, but it was too late. Moments later, two police officers emerged from their cruiser, their faces set in grim determination. "Ma'am, put the bolt cutters down and step away from the display," one of them commanded. Karen's lips pressed into a thin line as she reluctantly complied, her shoulders slumping in defeat. As the officers approached, she glared defiantly at Jenna and Michael, who stood watching with a mixture of relief and vindication. "Karen Wilkins, you're under arrest for vandalism and destruction of property," the other officer stated, placing her in handcuffs. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Jenna felt a surge of satisfaction as she watched the officers lead Karen to their patrol car. "I can't believe we finally caught her," she said, squeezing Michael's hand. "Now our Christmas can be saved." However, their triumph was short-lived. As the officers began to drive Karen away, she suddenly shouted, "This isn't over, Petersons. You haven't heard the last of me." Jenna's heart sank, and a chill ran down her spine. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. Karen's lips curled into a sinister grin. "Oh, you'll see," she said, her eyes glinting with malice. "I'm going to make your life a living hell." The patrol car disappeared into the night, leaving the Petersons feeling uneasy and unsure of what the future might hold. Jenna turned to Michael, her brow furrowed with concern. "Do you think she was serious?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael wrapped his arm around his wife's shoulders, pulling her close. "I don't know," he admitted, "but we'll face whatever comes our way together. We won't let her ruin our Christmas or our lives." Jenna nodded, drawing strength from her husband's words. "You're right," she said, her voice steadier. "We've come too far to let her win. We're going to finish this display, and we're going to enjoy the holidays with our family." As they returned to their work, the Petersons couldn't help but feel a sense of unease, knowing that Karen's threat still hung in the air, leaving them to wonder what she might have in store for them next. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity as the Petersons worked tirelessly to complete their Christmas display. Jenna and Michael poured their hearts into every detail, determined to make it the most spectacular it had ever been. "They're all finished," Jenna said, stepping back to admire their handiwork. The house practically glowed with thousands of twinkling lights. The animatronic reindeer moved in perfect synchronization, and the giant inflatable Santa loomed over the neighborhood, a beacon of holiday cheer. Michael wrapped his arm around Jenna's waist, pulling her close. "It looks amazing, honey," he said, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "I'm so proud of us for not letting that Grinch ruin our Christmas." Jenna nodded, a content smile spreading across her face. "Me too," she said. "And now, it's time to enjoy it." As the sun set, the Petersons gathered their children and invited the entire neighborhood to come and marvel at their creation. The streets were soon buzzing with the laughter of children and the delighted exclamations of adults. Jenna beamed, watching as the neighborhood kids ran from one display to the next, their eyes wide with wonder. She felt a surge of pride, knowing that their hard work had brought so much joy to their community. But unbeknownst to the Petersons, Karen was seething with rage as she watched the festivities unfold from the confines of her living room. She had been released on bail, and her thirst for revenge was stronger than ever. "Enjoy it while you can, Petersons," she muttered, her fingers drumming against the windowsill. "Your Christmas magic is about to come crashing down." The next morning, the Petersons awoke to a horrifying sight. Their pristine lawn was covered in a thick layer of mud, and the lights had been vandalized, half of them blinking erratically. Jenna let out a cry of dismay, her heart sinking. "Not again," she said, tears welling in her eyes. How could this happen? Michael rushed outside, his brow furrowed with concern. "I don't know, honey," he said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "But we're not going to let this stop us. We'll fix it, just like before." As the Petersons set to work, they couldn't help but feel a growing sense of dread. They knew that Karen was behind this latest attack, and they feared that she would stop at nothing to ruin their Christmas. With heavy hearts, Jenna and Michael began the arduous task of repairing the damage to their beloved Christmas display. As they worked, a growing sense of unease settled over them, fueled by the looming threat of Karen's promised vengeance. "I can't believe she's doing this," Jenna said, her voice trembling with frustration. "Didn't she learn her lesson the first time?" Michael placed a reassuring hand on his wife's shoulder. "We'll figure this out, Jenna," he said, his tone resolute. "We won't let her win." Despite their determination, the Petersons couldn't shake the feeling that Karen had something far more sinister in store. The once joyous atmosphere surrounding their display had been tainted by a palpable sense of dread. As they toiled through the day, repairing the damage and strengthening their security measures, they couldn't help but wonder what Karen might attempt next. The thought of her lurking in the shadows, plotting her next move, filled them with a sense of foreboding. That evening, as the neighborhood gathered once more to admire the Petersons' handiwork, a hush fell over the crowd. Everyone could feel the underlying tension, the unspoken worry that Karen's wrath had not yet been fully unleashed. Jenna and Michael put on brave faces, smiling and waving as the children marveled at the sights before them. But deep down, they knew that they were in for a battle, one that would test the very fabric of their family and community. Across the street, Karen sat in her dimly lit living room, her eyes narrowed in concentration. She had been working tirelessly, plotting her next move, and she was confident that this time, the Petersons would not be able to stop her. "Enjoy it while you can," she muttered, a sinister grin spreading across her face. "Because when I'm done, your precious Christmas will be nothing but a memory." As the night drew to a close and the neighborhood slowly emptied, the Petersons retreated to their home, their hearts heavy with uncertainty. They knew that they were facing a formidable foe in Karen, and they could only hope that their strength and determination would be enough to see them through the challenges that lay ahead. The following days were filled with a constant sense of unease for the Petersons. They found themselves constantly on high alert, scanning their property for any sign of Karen's meddling. Jenna jumped at every unexpected noise, her nerves frayed. What if she tries to sabotage the display again? She fretted, her brow creased with worry. Michael did his best to reassure her, But even he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that Karen was plotting something even more sinister. "We'll be ready for her this time," he said, strengthening the security measures around their home. As Christmas Eve approached, the Petersons decided to take an extra precaution. They installed a sophisticated security system, complete with motion-activated cameras and infrared sensors, determined to catch Karen in the act and put an end to her reign of terror. "There now will know if she so much as sets foot on our property," Jenna said, her eyes gleaming with determination. That night, as the Petersons and their children gathered around the twinkling tree, exchanging gifts and sharing laughter, they couldn't help but feel a palpable sense of unease. The specter of Karen's threat hung heavy in the air, casting a shadow over their otherwise joyous celebration. Across the street, Karen watched the festivities with a twisted smile. She had been biding her time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And as the clock struck midnight, she sprung into action. Donning a dark hooded jacket, Karen crept across the street, her steps muffled by the freshly fallen snow. Quickly, she began to tamper with the security system, disabling the sensors one by one. "This is going to be my greatest triumph yet," she whispered, a gleam of malice in her eyes. Meanwhile, the Petersons slumbered peacefully, unaware of the looming danger that lurked just outside their door. Little did they know that their once magical Christmas was about to take a dark and sinister turn. As the first rays of dawn began to peek over the horizon, the Petersons awoke to a horrifying sight. Their carefully curated Christmas display lay in utter ruins, the once twinkling lights now dark and lifeless. Jenna let out a strangled cry, her eyes widening in shock. "No, not again," she exclaimed, rushing outside to survey the devastation. Michael was right on her heels, his face etched with a mixture of disbelief and fury. "I don't understand," he said, his voice trembling. "How could this happen?" Their hearts sank as they realized that the security system had been completely disabled, rendering them powerless to stop the relentless onslaught of Karen's sabotage. Across the street, Karen watched with gleeful satisfaction, her arms folded across her chest. "I told you I'd make your life a living hell," she sneered, her lips curling into a malicious grin. Jenna and Michael turned to one another, their faces etched with despair. "What are we going to do?" Jenna whispered, her voice thick with emotion. But just as they were about to give in to despair, a flash of determination flickered in Jenna's eyes. "No," she said, her voice steadier. "We're not going to let her win. We're going to fight back." With renewed vigor, the Petersons set to work, undeterred by the seemingly insurmountable odds. They called the police, who immediately launched an investigation, and they enlisted the help of their neighbors, who rallied behind them in a show of unwavering support. As the community banded together, Karen's gloating turned to panic. She had not anticipated the level of resistance she would face, and she soon found herself cornered, her twisted schemes unraveling before her very eyes. In the end, justice prevailed, and Karen was charged with a litany of offenses, from vandalism to harassment. The Petersons, with the help of their neighbors, were able to restore their beloved Christmas display, and they celebrated the holiday with a renewed sense of triumph and unity. As the Petersons gathered around their tree, their faces aglow with the warm light of the twinkling lights, they knew that they had weathered the storm and emerged stronger than ever. They had stood up to the Karens of the world and won, and they were determined to make their Christmas and their community truly magical once again.